Okay, so the next panel will be about bridging between two worlds, oracles in the metaverse. And the moderator will be Adam English. Adam English is the host of the crypto podcast called Crypto with English. Adam's other roles include being the global ambassador for payment solution provider Alchemy Pay and blockchain BD manager for Intellect EU, an international technology company focused on digital finance and emerging technology. And the panelists will be Paul Claudius, Connor Martin, Richard Hort, and Alexandra Dean. Please, stage is yours.
All right, hello everybody. And by the way, thank you for the very nice introduction. So today's topic is bridging between worlds, oracles in the metaverse. And I think on any given day, if we're to look at news and social media, there are some places that almost, no pun intended, throw a very fungible meaning of what the metaverse is and even what metaverse oracles are. So kind of as a primer and as a preamble, I'd like to throw the question to our very excellent guests here. How would you all define the metaverse? And then even further, metaverse oracles? And the question's for anybody.
So in my opinion, I feel like we have the metaverse long time ago. Every game is a metaverse in itself, right? Like I remember I played Steam a while ago. It feels a bit like the intellect, in the intersection between gaming, social, and metaverse now. It's just broader. It's just the technology now is more developed with blockchain. It's just easier that we have crypto, so we can just buy in-game assets. But the metaverse like long time ago already. What do you think?
I think I'm just quoting a concept I read about from William from Metaversal, which defined, there's no real metaverse today, I would say. So there are bits and pieces which might be components of some metaverse. And as you just elaborated, there are virtual worlds, probably, or this is what this naming I'm kind of stealing right now. So closed worlds which are not connected and probably don't rely on a Web3 stack, probably will have something more decentralized on some common technology. And all this combined can become potentially a metaverse. So currently I guess, majority of people think Decentraland is the metaverse, but it's probably just a virtual world which can be part of a broader metaverse at some point in time.
Yeah, I think one thing that you want to separate, like the metaverse we want to talk about from some of its usages is like, well, I'm not sure I would say that Facebook's VR is a metaverse or that's necessarily what we want for a metaverse to be, because with Web 2, is it run by a big company? Is it just a world you step into, like a Ready Player One sort of situation? So I think an important factor for me to consider to be a relevant metaverse is, does it have physics in some sense? We know that the major blockchains are gonna their basic physics are going to remain the same. It's not like a few devs deciding to make a change and then all of a sudden your avatar's gone or your money's gone or something. So I think I agree with what you both say, but I think that's an important piece. It's can you trust it long term? Because otherwise it's not a universe, it's just a simulacra.
I'm curious if any of you have any ideas as to why this concept of a metaverse has punched into the zeitgeist now. Crypto's been around for a minute, VR's been around for longer, the internet has been around for, 25 years, and Facebook changes its name to Meta, and then everyone's talking about a metaverse. I don't know, my intuition is that, it starts to feel a little more real when there's, when there's more risk. VR is kind of fake. VR plus real value gets a little less fake and gets a little more scary, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen any substantive conversations regarding metaverse that have anything to do with VR, but I suppose the idea of real value at risk as expressed on the internet in different locations makes the internet a little more real, I guess. So I guess, I don't know, that would be my version of the metaverse.
Got it. And these were all excellent points raised. And Connor, especially about the cultural zeitgeist, that is an excellent point indeed. VR has been around for a decent amount of time. Crypto has had a pretty decent, you could say, origin for the past 10, 11 plus years. So yeah, those are some things to ponder. And going off of that, we're going to more or less go narrower and broader here. What will the role of oracles play in the metaverse, especially as to, let's say, expansion and transformation of different facets of life and different facets of industry?
I mean, as we're still struggling to define the metaverse, the role of the oracle in the not so defined metaverse is, I guess, still hard to define. But what oracles, at least partially already today, do is provide information where the information is absent, and it creates a level of interoperability in a very specific area. So this is for sure one, I guess, the most obvious case that oracles can potentially provide information through a metaverse or different metaverses or virtual worlds connected together, which don't rely on the exactly same primitives, and there's no defined interconnectivity between these. So an oracle can become a bridge, especially if we won't have a metaverse standard, something like, I don't know, like EVM, for example. So is everybody building on the metaverse virtual machine standard where you define certain characteristics, and if this is not given, oracles can potentially become a bridge to facilitate and actually enable what a metaverse, I guess, shall do instead of just a closed virtual world. So portability, interoperability, freedom to leave and join, take your reputation or the assets you have and make them accessible wherever you go. So this is one way. The most obvious one, especially I guess we all hope that a metaverse will be built on a Web3 stack, is just very plain stuff like initially payments. So you're abstracting away the different tokens and assets, and an oracle can provide a value to those.
I wonder if we can come up with something to make the conversation a little more concrete, like when I think about...
was as concrete as I think
no disparagement to what you said, but when I keep thinking about Metaverse I or Metaverses, I don't know, maybe to just bring up an example, I keep thinking about value expressed in games. In-game assets, MMORPGs, people have little isolated economies in these games, and the entrance or exit of value into those microeconomies are controlled by the game makers, right? Blizzard or whoever. And whenever I think about, a metaverse, which is like, let's just say multiple instances of the EVM, right, with a bunch of arbitrary message passing bridges that connect all of them, and oracles are the primary issuance mechanism for price data that can be passed between instances of the EVM. Okay, you have a bunch of MMORPGs, and all of a sudden value can't be controlled in this isolated area, and people can corner the market in World of Warcraft and make their living off of it, maybe by exiting the value somewhere. That also implies that value has to enter in a sort of permissionless way. And I'm not really convinced, like that sounds pretty groovy. I'm not really convinced that the negative externalities of that wouldn't outweigh the aforementioned grooviness. Would a market crash on World of Warcraft put people out of their homes and mortgages and in America or in Europe, something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really sold on the permissionless, value expression in the metaverse in general. I'm not sure if any of you guys have any ideas for how it could relieve anyone or make things more effective or powerful.
I'm not exactly sure how Oracle solved that though, so yeah. I feel like what you say is now very independent virtual worlds, right? Like, for example, if I'm a person and if I can imagine the metaverse, it's another life that I can live in whichever way I want, because right now everything is controlled by the government. I don't actually like some of the events that are happening. So I would want to have the virtual life in which I or the people who are similar to me can create like the life that we want to live. And that is like a connected world. And then we don't have the connected world yet. And so like how do the Oracle is going to bridge that, like bring in more real life events to us so we feel more real being in that virtual world.
Are you talking about like in a game, like Second Life or something like that?
Games, yeah.
I mean, I think oracles sort of represent, like, no offense, it's an amazing and important job, but they also kind of represent the things that we haven't fixed yet. So I mean, to some extent, someone started doing price oracles at some point, and then Uniswap came along, and now we sort of, that thing exists on chain. We have this sort of, the real value is being traded on chain, and you can look at real on chain data to like determine the value for a whole lot of assets. So oracles, like you say, like they make sure we stay connected to the outside world, but then it's like the metaverse, however you want to define it, whether it's, a bunch of EVM chains or a bunch of chains in general, whatever we want to put on there, if that becomes more important, we do more things there, then oracles become more obsolete for those core functions, and oracles will start playing more of a role in like incorporating the things that aren't already on chain. So I think that we'll see oracles expanding what they do, and more primitives, hopefully more like real, direct, on-chain, trustless primitives taking over some of the roles that oracles play today.
I partially disagree, because I think it will depend very much if we have the same chain securing information for all metaverses, or if they are somehow disconnected, and then you can say, okay, there's other tooling which can bridge that information, but that's kind of the role of the Oracle. So I think I'm quite curious to see if we'll see an EVM-based metaverse, and I could imagine that. I mean, why do we have so many blockchains? They are designed, I guess, to fulfill different functions, and probably we'll see some which are optimized to cater to a metaverse use case, broadly speaking. And then we need this transfer of information across these chains, and this is something I guess an Oracle could facilitate. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any sort of specific thing you're thinking of in regards to primitives that can replace like what is now patched with oracles in like layer 1 Ethereum. Like, is there a specific thing you're thinking of, or are you just thinking of like more direct protocol integrations that just don't require these like computationally expensive, price aggregation mechanisms?
I mean, to some extent, it's sort of like, it's like, what's going to replace fossil fuels? It's like, I have no idea. There's a bunch of things happening, and if you ask me like, well, how is DeFi going to work? I have no idea. And then people started inventing primitives that. The first time I heard about MakerDAO, I was like, that's not going to, that might work. Like, that sort of thing. And I think we see that happening. People invent primitives that feel like, that sounds a bit like a scam. And then you realize, no, these people actually figured that out. And I think like scaling is a good example. You say like, we need to bridge between different chains that do different things well. And like, well, lo and behold, we're seeing like more of L2s come along that are sort of like, they're not Oracle powered. To some extent they are, but like it's more of a stronger primitive, and like decentralization is a spectrum, right? So when I think of an oracle, I think of this like the places where we need to do the cop out. Somehow we wish we could be the most decentralized and like things are completely trustless and work well, but I mean the way what you call an oracle in computer science is like, oh, there's a magic box somewhere that does a thing that lets me perform the rest of this computation, right? And that's a fine thing to have. And like if we can replace it by an actual, good better and better systems, then all the better. I think, like, look at the oracles we have today. Like Chainlink oracles are probably more decentralized and better than a lot of the things we had in 2017, right? I mean, like, people rolling their own Oracle services, and like we can move further and further along that decentralization scale until we're, the thing might just really be an Oracle in name, sort of like Uniswap price oracles. Like, they're not oracles in the traditional sense of someone is depositing information onto the chain for us to consume and we need to trust them. It's like more of the reality has moved more on chain. Like, the exchanges are actually on chain now, so you don't have to aggregate the feed into the metaverse. The thing is taking place in the metaverse where we can compute it. Yeah, that's derail from your question, but I mean, I think we're seeing more decentralized bridges and roll-ups and that kind of thing. So that would be an example of oracles being not necessarily replaced, but like we're inventing alternatives for the traditional Oracle model where we just have to trust some third party.
Do you think the Uniswap Oracle is like a misnomer?
Well, I mean, it's an overloaded term, right? It's not an Oracle in the same sense as, all the Oracle providers here.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's an Oracle if you ask, what's the level of my mage that is playing a game on Ethereum? Like, no, you said that you're asking a smart contract what's happening in the place where that contract is really the source of truth.
And it's interesting to think about, like, your idea of like a more direct expression of data or prices, and like having the Uniswap Oracle be the first instance of that, where you have this kind of like outside information that's, trusted or whatever, and put into some feed, and that's the Oracle. And then later on you have the direct read of like, the state of the liquidity in a given pool, or, some n number of pools. And then after that, I don't know, it's like, method selectors for like the incoming calls of the mempool or something, I don't know. Yeah.
And these are all excellent points made. And in fact, I heard an interesting key term raised, isolated economies, and that also brings to mind parallel economies. So my question for all of you is, how will Oracle scale and improve metaverse transactions? And I think often this is quite poignant in metaverse gaming, whether you're buying skins, whether you're buying items, armor, equipment. How will oracles improve, these aspects of gaming, or just transactions generally speaking, whether it's financial services or even supply chains?
So I think maybe why are we always seeing something like virtual worlds reappearing? Something you raised. I think there's clearly a desire to, I don't know, some escapism, or why people want that, and why it's reappearing, and also why did we have this stop between, I don't know, the 2000s and now having metaverses, in the meantime just gaming? I think because virtual worlds and the metaverse, more broadly speaking, were missing kind of utility. So the question is, why would you go there? You probably need to enjoy the time you're spending there, or you're doing something which is of value. And in order to actually provide this, which is currently, I think, not so much given. So if you're going to Decentraland, it can be a pretty lonely place, and you don't know what to do. It requires, and I think this is what potentially can push the metaverse into reality for a much broader set of people than virtual worlds, is that you can freely integrate utility. So if you are building a product, let's call it like a MetaFi-ish product. So if you can borrow money to buy a skin, and because you're using it there, or you're going to some place and you're receiving some incentives, you can repay the loan through which you financed your purchase. So for example, that's an example of a project we're currently talking to. And here, I think this is the utility of the Oracle, that you can provide information to enable MetaFi transactions. And by empowering these different building blocks, so the Oracle just takes a small but relevant part there, I think the metaverse can become actually an attractive and relevant place people would want to spend time in.
I think for me it's interesting because there are Decentraland, Sandbox, Roblox, there's so many different kind of virtual worlds. And if I take time to build my virtual identity in one of the world, and I actually pay money to buy the outfits, spend time and do all of those things, and it's hard for me to take that identity to then another virtual world. So maybe Oracle is effective in a way that it bridges that. So I'm just imagining a future where I can take one identity to another one. So I don't have to take so much of my time to build that identity again.
I think the original question was that how are they going to improve transactions in metaverses? Or metaversi?
Right.
I would probably put it in an opposing viewpoint. I don't think they will. I think it'll be a catastrophe.
Why so?
Because maybe there's some world where in-game assets or digital expressions of microeconomies can like jump into different layers and whatnot. But look at DeFi. World of Warcraft is going to get pillaged. People are going to like print money and in like tiny expressions of value, and virtual economies are going to get wrecked. Every Oracle is going to get hacked.
So do you look at this as a slippery slope then, ultimately?
The slippery slope, it's a cliff.
Got it.
It's straight down.
Well, I think you're also imagining, like, that's always when we say, like, oh, what if we replace the central bank by, a blockchain? Like, that's a cliff. Like, now you're putting something that is actually fairly untested in certain scales and, like, putting it in, like, or you're imagining it in the place of an already huge scale operation. And, like, yes, there's so many ways that can go wrong. But, like, realistically, Blizzard isn't going to, like, put blockchain NFTs in place of their in-game items immediately, and if they do, they will be like, well, we're going to start an Oracle that we run on the chain that we have full multi-sig control over, and so it's I mean, the way it always seems to happen is like a big company says like, yeah, we're going to do it, then they pull back, and then a year or two later, there's a small-scale operation that kind of starts trying that out. But I mean, I don't think it's necessarily catastrophic, because I think like oracles are going to make it possible to do the transactions, but we also I think we should always strive for maximal decentralization, and we can always start with the high trust little oracle that just says what the truth is, and we all buy it and get irrationally exuberant, and then we get wrecked, and then we rise from the ashes again, and then that forced us to become more decentralized and think more about decentralized bridges, decentralized Oracle solutions, and so on. So I think, oracles, to me, they act as this sort of frontier that pull things in, and then sort of the rest of the space scurries around and figures out new. I might sound like, the techno-optimist who's like, well, we're going to invent perfect fusion solar power and go to the stars in 10 years, just give enough money to the scientists. But I think to some extent, I don't think that innovation has a specific direction. You can't say, oh, we're going to solve the metaverse question and solve oracles and trustfulness there. I think what happens with new primitives is usually that someone comes up with a cool thing that doesn't solve any of the existing problems, but it makes something new possible that people gradually get excited about, and then we create new aspects of the metaverse. I'm generally skeptical of the idea of like just pulling in what we already have into the metaverse, because Yearn isn't exactly like a fund, and Uniswap isn't exactly like a decentralized or like a centralized exchange and so on. Like they are slightly different, and the words we use might be similar, but if you look at like the actual inner workings, we aren't exactly traditional finance or traditional contracts. It's just a naming convention, and the metaverse that is actually built on crypto is not going to look exactly like just Second Life or World of Warcraft with NFTs on top.
You're suggesting this kind of intermediary stage of permissioned oracles, which exists for a few years while the dust settles.
Yeah, and not as a like a strategy that like let's do that, not as like a business strategy, because this is like this is a space of people. It's not a business that we can operate and say like, oh, now what we're going to do is we're going to create a bunch of oracles and have them there, and then we're going to replace them eventually. That's just sort of what happens, because the first movers are usually going to be the ones who say, oh yeah, we're cool and decentralized, and you own all your things perfectly, but oh, by the way, we have this little thing. But the oracle, you can trust the oracle. The oracle's fine, and then might be, might not be, but eventually people are going to come in and see like, well, they started to extract or create value, but maybe we can do it better, like, or more decentralized. I know, like, Eulers has that as a goal. Is like, wait, can we do Aave but use like on-chain price mechanisms, for example? I just see that as the general trajectory always, and it's really hard to decide where it goes, but it just feels like that's the propellant.
Well, this is certainly a lot to think about, and very interesting, great points raised. And going on to the next point, so I have a compound question for all of you, a two-in-one, if you will. So how will data and oracles be leveraged to create an interconnected metaverse, and should there be an interconnected metaverse?
Didn't we already talk about this? I feel like we've just been talking about that.
Well, to expand upon it a little bit more.
Yeah, so just repeating myself, I think an interconnected metaverse, there's no non-connected metaverse, and it's just not a metaverse. So I think this is something I guess we all agree on. And then the question is, what's the role again of the Oracle? If it's interconnected, it depends. I think kind of like on a technical question, what tech stack is used. Is it the same one? Then the role of the Oracle is, I guess, less important. Is it on a fragmented stack? Then it will be more important. And yeah, my assumption, repeating this here, is that we'll see different chains trying to capture market share in this space. So we'll have an interconnected metaverse, ideally, which will require oracles to bridge information through these different stacks.
Do you guys think that the permissionless bridging systems and oracles will kind of merge into the same product eventually?
I mean, it's like the definition of the oracle. The definition of the metaverse is the oracle there to provide a price point or a state, or what's the scope of the product the oracle shall provide? There is for sure some overlaps, but permissionless bridges, I mean, they provide information on the state on different chains, but not really on value of the assets which are in a certain state.
I don't know.
When we talk about interconnectedness, I'm going to put on my auditor hat, and like this works. I mean, this works in like traditional security as well. Like I think there's a good XKCD about this, where like I figured out a way to connect all the things to all the things, and then you realize, oh, it's a security mess, and one thing breaks and everything breaks, and like then you start to silo it again and so on. So there's always this idea. I mean, I'm from Sweden, and we love just interconnecting everything, and that's why I felt a tinge of like smugness when like our major grocery chain just stopped operating for 5 days because I think the American consultancy company payment system that they had bought just stopped working. It's like, well, if you connect everything, then everything can fail together. So I think in the exuberance of interconnecting, I also want to urge everyone to think about the things that we always advise clients. It's like, well, trust the DeFi Legos you interact with only with caution, right? Make sure you protect your system. Like, make sure that ideally, like if you use an oracle, don't trust it to any extent. We've had several talks about that. Like, how do you make sure that you handle complete oracle failures, or if they just shut down, or if they start reporting really weird prices? Like, how do you protect your own little system? So I think it's less of the frictionless interconnectedness, because like frictionlessness means like if I give all of you my seed phrase, I can call up any one of you and like, hey, can you buy me some uni? It's like, well, that's super, super easy, but it's also a security nightmare, because like the convenience and being able to move things around really easily is often not compatible with maximum security. So I think that it's important that we try, and bridges are an excellent example of this. Like, oh, it's really convenient to be able to bridge assets, but like that's actually, all the largest hacks and losses in recent time have come from bridges being hacked, right? So I think it's important that whenever we're trying to interconnect, even like we're interconnecting different, interconnecting using oracles and so on, we also need to be aware of how far we are extending the trust, and all our systems should be, protect themselves a bit, and the oracles that are further away from us, you should trust less, and like the primitives that are more on your chain and that you can understand really well, you can trust a bit more.
Got it. And going from that, often blockchain and perhaps the broader conversation of decentralized technology, some of the points that are parroted that, many of these aspects and processes are quite energy intensive and in fact, maybe even oppressive and damaging on the environment. So going from that, what is going to be the energy cost to start, migrating companies and eventually industries into some sort of metaverse space?
Well, Ethereum switching to ETH2, which makes the point moot.
2 million terawatts. It depends on the scale. I mean, like if the metaverse swallows Google, then now we all have Google, like we're running there. I don't think. I do think energy intensity is coming up a bit more in like the conversation in tech now in general. But like if you look at the things, if you don't look specifically at blockchain, but if you look at tech in general, like the things that are being displaced and like the value that's being produced by tech is usually pretty. Like the energy to value production is usually, the ratio is usually pretty good. And I'm not too worried about oracles. Just if everyone run one oracle and then the energy intensity goes down.
I'm a little more worried about the energy consumption in the universe, or our verse, the real world, than the metaverse at the moment.
But do you think like the metaverse is going to swallow? Like, blockchains and like proof of work maybe. But what do you think about like the oracles? I've never seen that as an energy.
No, well, it's like a
something?
tiny bit. It's like a call on the EVM. That's what we're talking about right now. And like, seems like the whole industry is trending towards proof of stake. We'll hope that works. I personally hope that works. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of proof of work, and that's the thing that is what people are talking about when they're talking about chains consuming a lot of energy.
I'm also quite optimistic because now we are willing to pay for a transaction, which is somehow linked with proof of work to energy costs. But this is usually like, a DeFi transaction, so there's some monetary value attached to it. So if you will use some consensus mechanism to enable the metaverse in a pretty, abstract way, probably the value by walking through something and clicking on something you won't be able to offset the cost for that transaction and the energy, like you would be willing to pay for a Uniswap trade of, for some token because you're expecting some financial gain. So I think just by the cost, the low willingness to pay for using the metaverse, I think this will be highly linked to the energy consumption and the infrastructure we'll be using.
But at the same time, I don't think all companies going to go on the metaverse. It's going to always be like something extra to our lives, but it's not like we're going to function only in the metaverse and not in the real world anymore, right? It's just going to be the same whether you used to play games anymore, so I don't think it's going to be very energy intensive.
I don't know, I could see the brain in the jar future, where just like, I'm just in a vat and y'all are in the vat too, and we just kind of are in the
And you solve the oracle problem.
Yeah, one brain to another. That seems to me like energetically like pretty efficient.
Backpedaling on everything. I'm not a climate scientist, and like these are not the numbers I look at day to day. So, I'd say like it hasn't. It's never struck me, but maybe someone in the questions can come up and give us some real numbers because I have.
What, energy consumption on Ethereum?
No, but like the oracle portion of the metaverse.
Well, it does. That's like saying quantifying the energy consumption of a single transaction.
Yeah,
Ethereum uses the same amount of energy regardless of how many transactions are in a block.
Yeah, we looked at offsetting transactions we are broadcasting for clients, and the costs are fairly negligible Yeah. So because you're always optimizing to reduce transaction costs, so you're at the same time trying to reduce energy consumption. So I think this just comes hand in hand. So the entire transactions by all oracles, I think here in the room, is still a very negligible part of the energy consumption for Ethereum currently.
I feel like I should just clarify for those listening that, like, if there is an empty block in Ethereum, it uses the same amount of energy as a full block. There is no transactional expression of energy consumption. The energy is used to secure the network, has nothing to do with transactions on the network. So you cannot quantify, a call, for instance, an Oracle call, and tie it to energy consumption. It's impossible or illogical.
Excellent points made, and I'm sure you can all see we covered a lot of ground today pertaining to oracles, metaverse, feasibility, and considerations to keep in mind. So now we're going to enter our Q&A session. So as far as questions, what's on your mind, everybody? What do you want to ask?
It has to be about metaverses.
Anybody?
So okay, then I'll do a poll. Who has a character, an avatar in Decentraland or Voxels or whatnot?
I have never used Decentraland. Is this still running? Is this like a 2017 project? You guys use Decentraland?
Yeah, recently.
What am I doing?
I walked around.
You need to leave the panel.
Oh my god, I'm out of date.
I was on Rack's DJ set in Decentraland.
I'm a crypto boomer.
That's a fashion show.
I'm also not much of a gamer, so I don't spend much time in virtual worlds.
But talking about that, Decentraland recently has a fashion show. So actually, if you think about energy intensive that people use to fly to Paris to attend a fashion show, Metaverse fashion show is going to save so much more, right? Because everyone can just go online and see the models instead of flying around.
The hardware for what? Making a chain with high throughput?
Being able to have, like you said, EVM states, being in the Oracle and all this. So it's an essential phase, right? What we're living through right now, it's pretty hard, but...
Yeah, I mean, maybe someone else can speak to this, but I know nothing about VR. But as far as, scaling Ethereum or EVM-like environments, it's, from what I understand, it has nothing to do with hardware capabilities, but rather, how to scale Ethereum. It's a whole thing that's been the topic of conversation this whole time for the last 8 years or whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably make a fool of myself talking about things I don't know that well, but yeah, the closest thing I could see is sort of like, well, what if, CK verification becomes super well supported by hardware and is made much more efficient, and we can have almost like infinitely recursive snarks in our, VR world. Then maybe you could put the entire VR world on there, but go ask someone at Starkware if that's ever going to be feasible, or if there's some boundary condition of the universe that makes me wrong here. But I also think like that the VR hardware situation is sort of like separate, and I think we're always going to be the chain and the metaverse is going to be sort of a back end to things. Like, there's nothing stopping you from like going crazy with skins on your local Decentraland client if you want and you know how to hack on it. But like the question of what exists where is, that's a different thing, right? Like who owns what and where is this item, but then like how you choose to represent it and what fidelity you want to like display your features and so on. That's maybe a question for Zuckerberg. I don't know.
Well, I have a question. So, like I mentioned, we covered a lot of ground today, and I'm a little bit of a movie buff, so I'm gonna ask a question to see if, let's say this could provide context to, let's just say, the average person in the street. So, where we are in 2022 right now, how close are we to, let's say, reaching a type of level and sophistication expressed in, let's say, movies like The Matrix, cyberpunk movies, so like The Matrix, Altered Carbon, Black Mirror, Johnny Mnemonic, movies from that era that, more or less have some of the trappings and themes that we kind of see reflected in real life today. And, from a practical point of view, if let's say there is, in the future, a port of sorts in, let's say the back of our skulls, akin to the Matrix, you can sit in one place and do your work, do your errands, pay your bills, interact with, and do whatever you need to do without having to hop in your car, move around. I'm not saying it's ideal, but I wonder, are we closer to that than we think? Or do you think that level of, you could say, metaverse expansion is a little too over-exaggerated, far out, or maybe a little bit too much in outer space?
I think Wei Dai said something good in his B Money paper that's I always come back to. It's like the value of the metaverse. He was talking about crypto anarchy and paraphrasing and saying something like, threats of violence are pointless because violence is impossible. Like there's a very, very nice feature of the metaverse that it can't escape into the physical world. And I think like once it starts trying to, then I'm not saying it should be stopped. I just think like at the end of the day, people are people, and like the best things in life are physical. So I think we're further. We might not be all that far away from it technically, but I think like culturally, I mean, we're still an ape, and I think we're going to remain an ape for a while. And actually, I think we should start I think we get very excited about like, can we pull the metaverse into everything instead of just making the metaverse a more fun place with its own things, right? You don't have to pull in all the fun from everywhere else. You can build specific fun there that can be siloed off, and then here's a world where I can jump around and change anonymity, and there is no like, like government is like forbidden forever because like there is no threat of violence. And then, you can exit that and just be in the regular world, right? So it's sort of like if you want the Matrix metaphor, it's like, well, if it's super seamless and safe to just like jump between the worlds, then, and you don't die in the Matrix. Like I don't want you to die in the Matrix. As long as you don't die in the Matrix, the Matrix can be as fun as you want, I think.
Well said.
I also don't think we need this level of sophistication on the technology side to have a relevant metaverse. So I think we don't need to be at that level, but we just need to find out, or the people building the metaverse, what provides utility to people at this point in time. So I think there are some events which can facilitate this. Look at, video conferences taking relevance globally, also for not very technical affine people. So I think the metaverse doesn't need to be like seamless as the reality, but there needs to be a reason why you want to spend time there. For games, it's because they provide joy, and you like to spend time in it. And if we don't figure this out, it doesn't matter on what technology stack this is built, how decentralized it is, or whatnot. And I think we're still somehow struggling with this, because the only time you can actually do something in the metaverse is if there's some sort of event or something happening. So we just need to provide a reason to go there, to have actual people there. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, I guess.
Very well said.
I think also, I don't know, when I think about the metaverse or questions like that, I kind of think about this dynamic that I see with developing technology in general, where people sort of imbue it with this magical sentiment. You see it with quantum computing or with crypto a few years ago, and now with whatever the metaverse is, where it what it is fully unknown, basically. There's no boundaries to it, and so people can just project anything they want onto this blank canvas and just go full fantasy mode. And I feel like my intuition is that most sort of frontier tech is and will be infused with a tiny little bit about that. Like, you need to be a little crazy, a little twinkle in the eye to work really hard at this stuff. But I don't really think it's that helpful to think about stuff that's like full, like fantasy mode. I feel like keeping it like, how do I help people from now until 5 years in the future is like probably a good place to be.
I think for me it's gonna take, like the technology is there already, it's developing really fast. It's gonna take 5 to 10 years because like personally, sometimes I really want to try out different identity, try to be like maybe a man, for example, maybe wearing a dress that can be on fire. So just to be able to have a complete different identity and just try out a different life in a virtual world is very exciting for me. So instead of wearing these big VR glasses, I think the technology can develop into something more light and easy for me to just put on, as in like normal glasses or just like the contact lens. So I think it can just take 10 years with the current development.
That's quite optimistic. I like that.
I also think like we're seeing more and more of a cultural shift towards people being excited about technology being more like tools. I know like Urbit, for example, is based on the idea of like, well, it should be a tool in the sense of a hammer. Like a hammer is not going to tell you to like, hey, do you want to add something to your subscription, some in-building purchases? Like, but we have this, we should remember that like the metaverse and the gaming world is sort of based on, like old school games weren't based on that idea. Like they sent you, a disc or something and then you can play it as much as you want. You can hack away on it. But like a lot of what's closing in on being the metaverse is, has like a strange business model to it. And I think like in the spirit of what you're saying, like you should build things to help people. I think we're also seeing more and more people caring more and more about like the things like the metaverse I have or that I interact with should not be something that pulls me in and like ensnares me. It should be something that serves me in my life and something that helps me talk to my friends when I want to and isn't in the way when I don't want to. So I think that it's not going to be that invasive because I do think like people I remember when I started school, people like being at Google would be the coolest thing ever. It was the coolest company in the world, and just a few years later, it's like, well, maybe they're like they took away the "don't be evil" phrase, and like maybe they're becoming more of a monolith. Because there was this extreme optimism about like techno future, right? And then like eventually people get like, oh, it's ensnaring me in a way. How can I use it without letting it use me too much? And people seem like people are sort of ensnared by it right now, but they do want out. You see people saying like, oh, like don't touch my data, don't like leave me alone, like looking for outs. So I think a lot of people are looking for outs, and I hope the metaverse can.
Well, I see an overarching...
offer some of that.
Yes. Well, I see an overarching theme here, and it seems like whatever direction the metaverse goes in, it should be purposeful, defined, clarified, and also have a little bit of optimism mixed into that as well. So,
Very quick.
What do you guys think of Meta's perspective? Because, I mean, the discussion if the metaverse is coming or in science fiction or not, I mean, putting it aside, Facebook, aka Meta, is pretty much going all in on that, right? So you can ask a Meta executive, they're better looking in the next 5 to 10 years, because that's the runway that they have. In the next 5 to 10 years, they fully believe in this. So what I would be curious from your perspective on coming from a crypto angle, because Meta doesn't talk about crypto basically at all, right? Like at least officially. So how do you look at this? Like, if this bet that they're going all in actually works, and we have more and more immersive technology coming from this video game perspective almost, and we use more and more the metaverse that they're building, to what extent can we actually build this in a centralized way? And at what, like, do you think these metaverses that they envision, coming from their perspective, are actually possible in a fully centralized way? Or do you think at a certain size it is actually necessary to be sustainable to have decentralized components that's compatible with other networks? So how do you look at this, especially coming from this Oracle perspective? Because that's also what this discussion is about, right? The context of metaverse and Oracle.
I have a hard time imagining anything in the metavision happening in any kind of a decentralized way. I think that they could have economic components, like, expressions of digital value that must be decentralized, right? That have to be serviced by oracles and provide legitimacy to their, new virtual environment that they're creating. But it seems pretty clear to me that, if you're in Meta's virtual land, you're on Meta's server, and you're owned by Meta. But
Yeah, I think it will really depend who provides the best utility for a user, and not everybody. I mean, we see this with social networks, really cares where data is being stored. So there's at least, I guess, a minimum level of user experience, which a decentralized version of the metaverse, what we then actually call the metaverse, needs to adhere to attract people. If this is not being met, then there's, I think, a high risk of people ending up in a centralized virtual world and spend their time there. So, this is why I think also we need to, or the people building this need to much more focus on what is an engaging metaverse, maybe separate initially, but in the long term connected. And this is the only way how you get relevant users, and then you actually have a place where people are.
Yeah, I think that, like, be so good they can't ignore you, so that we offer something that, can't just be replicated, and then, then Meta's going to hopefully start supplying an oracle to, reading data from their servers, and that can be, because they need to be bridging over somehow. But yeah, I think, like, keep building with people in mind and avoid sucking people into short-term games of, like, short-term gains, and, like, try to build, like, real value that makes people want to stick around, because I think that's what the space has done really well for a long time. Like, people stick around during the bad times as well, because they're excited, and I think we just stay tapped into that excitement and just hope that it spreads, and then Meta has to care.
Got it. Well, it looks like the points expressed here are a perfect note to end on. So that concludes our panel, everyone. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you.